All right, folks, I think we have a rogue problem in Hearthstone right now, and I want to talk about it.
Hey, buddy, watch this.
Yeah, guys, I think we're very, very close to a great meta in Hearthstone. The game feels almost perfect to play, but in my mind, there's a little bit too much warrior and a little bit too much rogue. And in particular, I think playing against Dr. Boom, Mad Genius, the hero card, feels really bad a lot of the time right now in Hearthstone. And that means I thought that there was a warrior problem at first. There's a lot of Dr. Booms. There's a lot of warriors. Why are there so many warriors? Warrior must be too good. So as I'm wont to do, I headed over to HS Replay and I checked out some data on different matchups and how the meta's shaking down right now. And I took a look at warrior, and there are two versions of warrior right now, bomb and control. And this is what I saw. So you look at bomb warrior here. This is a list of matchups against other decks that are popular and prominent in the meta right now. Green numbers mean it's favored in those matchups, and red or yellow numbers means it's maybe not quite as good. And in general, the deck's a good deck, so you'd expect it to be favored against a majority of matchups. But you'll note here, there's actually a lot of reds and oranges and yellows on this screen. There's a lot of things that beat Bomb Warrior. It's actually not a particularly dominant deck. And then if you look at Control Warrior here, I've got even more of the same. And again, a lot of reds and yellows, plenty of different meta counters that are available out there to beat Control Warrior. So apparently that means maybe Warrior's not really the problem after all. And then I decided to go take a glance at Tempo Rogue. And look at this list. You'll notice something very, very different here. It's pretty much all green, except for one little tiny spot down there in the bottom right-hand corner where there's a stack of red, which means it's favored or even against pretty much everything in the meta. Tempo Rogue is good against it all, except for Bomb, Control Dragon, and Mechathune Warrior. In other words, the only counters to Tempo Rogue are Warrior. And what that means is because Tempo Rogue is so insanely good against the field right now, that there's this natural counterbalance that happens where a ton of warriors show up to beat Tempo Rogue because the warrior win rate is essentially propped up by the fact that it's so good against Tempo Rogue. It's pretty fairly matched across the field against everything else, but in this particular 1v1, they balance each other out. And what that means is that we've essentially got a meta here that's being controlled and defined by these two decks. And it's not really warrior that's the problem. Without Tempo Rogue's existence, Warrior would probably feel fine and we probably wouldn't see it all that often. But because Tempo Rogue is otherwise so dominant and so good with its aggressive style against all these other decks, Warrior pops up to match it. And that's why these are two of the most popular decks, or the two most popular decks in Hearthstone today. So yeah, what that means is I think we really do have a Tempo Rogue problem. Because of Tempo Rogue's dominance, it's reshaping and shifting the entire meta around it. And I'm not sure that's a good thing for Hearthstone. Typically, to me, that means the deck has too much influence. So I wanted to take a deeper look at Tempo Rogue cards and see if there's anything I can identify that's creating this problem. So here's a list of, the 10, 15 highest drawn win rate cards in Tempo Rogue. I was like, is there some, insane outlier here that's making this deck absurd? And if you look at the top of the list, right, you see Evil Miscreant. That is certainly a new card from Rise of Shadows, and you might be placing a lot of blame on Evil Miscreant because the lackeys are so good. And that is absolutely a defining card, a very powerful card. But you know what? It's a card to me that doesn't necessarily feel that bad or all that swingy. It takes a little while for the resources to be utilized. It's just a 1/5 minion. Now, I'm talking about that like it's a bad thing. Obviously, it's a fantastic card. Obviously, it's a great play. We know that. That's been proven. It's clearly the highest drawn win rate card here. But what I mean is it doesn't necessarily feel bad or feel like it's winning the game all on its own instantly. It's not that swingy of a card in its own right. It takes some additional mana to really make it work. It really operates through the other pieces of the deck, So to me, Evil Miscreant, although it might reign at the top of the list here, isn't that much more dominant than anything else. If you look all the way down to like Captain, well, really almost at the bottom of the list there. It's 54% win rates versus 56.8. It's not like there's a wide range. All of these cards are pretty close and all very good just as a part of the overall Tempo Rogue package. And then we've got Edwin and Leroy at the top there. Those are staple classic legendaries that have obviously been influential in Hearthstone for a very long time. And then you've got the Raiding Party Waggle Pick Dread Corsair package coming in as well. And those really are, if I picked the 6 most influential cards in Tempo Rogue, those are the exact 6 I would have expected. So no surprise to me at all here to see those at the top of the list. Now, you might say, well, what's the point of this exercise? Well, we're going to get there. But I think one important thing is we've kind of ruled out things like maybe Vendetta is not really that big of a deal. I thought Vendetta originally might have been one of the things that fueled and powered this deck, but a lot of lists don't even run it these days. And clearly, from a drawn win rate standpoint, it's not like standing above the rest, nor is Underbelly Fence. So I think we can eliminate those from the discussion. Like, we can see those probably aren't a problem. But I do want to focus in specifically on a couple things, Evil Miscreant not being one of those. I think it's cool to have this lackey playstyle. I think that's fun, and I don't think it feels too bad. So I'm going to say Evil Miscreant is not the issue here for this rogue problem. I want to talk about some other cards, and this is Waggle Pick. And what you see here on the screen, and I blew this up huge so you could see it again. Thank you, HS Replay, for these incredible statistics. This is the win rate per turn for a card like Waggle Pick. So, for instance, you can see coining a Waggle Pick on turn 3 stays under a 50% win rate. But when you play Waggle Pick on turn 4, that's when your win rate jumps into the high to mid 50s. And it's pretty good on 4, 5, and 6. You'll see a little jump on 7. You might be wondering why it's better on 7. Well, that's specifically if you equip the Waggle Pick on turn 7. That means you'll be depleting the second charge on turn 8, which means you can do the double Leroy combo where you Leroy, you attack for 6, you Waggle Pick attack, you bounce your Leroy back to hand, you replay your Leroy for 3, and that's a 16 burst combo. That's why you see the bump on 7. It's not on 8 because it's when the card is played, remember? But you can see it's pretty good and an influential card. But I'll note that to me, this is a kind of healthy representation of what a curve should look like. Cards are obviously going to be good, like Waggle Pick in the mid game. It's okay for a card to have a win rate that's good. That's fine. Good cards need to exist. So when I look at this, I don't really see any issues. I don't think Waggle Pick in and of itself causes any problems. But there's another card I want to talk about here and I want to emphasize, which is the Dread Corsair. And clearly this is a card that's comboed rather nicely with Waggle Pick. You play Raiding Party, you draw Dread Corsairs and a Waggle Pick. You don't always get the Dread Corsairs, but you often do, which means you have this incredibly high tempo turn where you play a 4 attack weapon that's either hitting face or maybe taking a value trade, while also depositing a free 3/3 or 2 free 3/3 minions onto the board. And as you can see with Dread Corsair, the win rate here tells a totally different story. You have this insanely high peak on turn 4, almost reaching 60% win rate that declines over time. So what we're saying here is that the combination of Waggle Pick plus Dread Corsair, when you can play them both on turn 4, really starts to boost the win rate of this deck. So Dread Corsair starts to look a little bit like a problem to me. I don't think a card should be that much better in a specific turn or scenario. It's starting to look like it's trending a little too well, because clearly as you proceed throughout the game, it loses a lot of its power level. So it's about hitting that one perfect moment, that one spike in power, and that's quite a bit of variance to sustain. If like just one good turn wins you the game, and it's not all these decision points across the game, to me, that's not Hearthstone. That's how it's supposed to be, or not as fun as it should be, perhaps. To me, in my personal experience, I don't like that as much when it's one turn make or break. So between the combination of these two, you can see here maybe this is a problem package. And you might say, well, okay, Dread Corsair is the spike, this is the problem. But in my mind, Dread Corsair has been around forever. It's a classic card. It's never been a problem in the past. So to me, I think we have to target the one that's enabling some crazy stuff. And because Waggle Pick is not only empowering some really big turns on turn 4, but it's also got this kind of second hump with the Leroy burst combos where you start bouncing stuff back to your hand and you do some crazy things. I think Waggle Pick is much more of a problem and really kind of the defining card of this package in Tempo Rogue. But I'll note, it is not the only card that I think is an issue. Take a look at this bad boy, Edwin Van Cleef. a card that's been a staple in Rogue for a very long time. When you look at a win rate chart like this, you can see why. An Edwin played on turn 2 is well over any other win rate we've seen so far, trending towards 75% if you can play an Edwin on turn 2. And the reason that is because often anybody who's doing that is committing to a really big Edwin, like a 6-6, an 8-8. I had a 12-12 Edwin played against me on turn 2. Last night, my opponent played Prep Rating Party, Coin Edwin, a 12-12 Edwin Van Cleef, and they also drew 6 cards in a single turn. That is ridiculous. And that's exactly why Edwin has such a high win rate here. And you can see still an insanely high win rate on turn 3, pretty solid win rate on 4 and 5. It's really not until turn 6 or 7 where this win rate trends down more towards a healthy rate for the deck. So again, here we have a card with a ridiculous power spike early in the game that is deciding, 10 to 15% extra win rate points when it's played that early. That is kind of absurd to me, and I don't think that's healthy at all. So we might need some way to cut back on Edwin Van Cleef. I think this is another problem card. This is just a really concerning trend line as far as I'm concerned. So that said, looking at these two cards, I propose some quick fixes, and I'm going to tell you these aren't perfect, but there's some ideas to think over. Here are my changes. I want to move Waggle Pick to a 3-3. And you might be like, wait a minute, Regis, you just gave it extra durability. That's almost like a buff. Even if you reduced its attack, you're giving it 9 total attack instead of 8. That might be a buff. But first off, I don't really like killing cards. I don't like when Blizzard nerfs things so hard that they just go away forever. That to me isn't the right way to do it. So I want to make sure there's some power level retained. So I want Waggle Pick to have some upside here. It's got a lot of durability, particularly things like Captain Greenskin could make this card really crazy now. But if you think about it, the 3 durability in a way is almost a sideways nerf too, because it means you won't be able to bounce things back to your hand as quickly as you might otherwise have been able to do. So there are 2 important changes here. One, you kill the turn 4 Dread Corsair. Because Dread Corsair costs 4 mana, if you reduce the attack of Waggle Pick down to 3, you can't play your Dread Corsairs immediately on turn 4. You'd have to wait till a future turn to do that. So it slows it down there just a little bit. Now, beyond that, you lose the bounce as quickly. So there are 2 small nerfs here, but still retaining the total damage output for Waggle Pick. So hopefully you don't completely kill or break the card. So now moving on to Edwin. Again, I didn't want to totally change how this card works and totally kill it, because I think it's a classic Hearthstone staple sort of card. So I wanted it to retain some degree of power level. So what I did here is I just took the stats from +2/+2 and trimmed them back down to +2/+1. This way, Edwin still has this upside where you can do a lot of attack, but the health total stays a little bit more manageable, so that maybe there are some options for decks to remove it more efficiently. If it goes to 4 to 5 to 6 health, there might be a handful of cards there, things like, Wing Blasts and weapon attacks and just other minions on board that can trade into it a little more easily. So you retain a little bit of that upside, but you give your opponents a little bit more counterplay, hopefully with the goal that it won't have that crazy power level spike that we currently see on turns 2 and 3 when you play your Edwin. So there's still potential for it to be cool and scary and big, but it doesn't feel quite as bad to play against. So instead of having, 12 health, in that case, maybe instead of gaining a total of 10, your Edwin gains a total of 5 and has 7 health. And perhaps a couple small minions or a Waggle Pick attack in return can help you chip through the Edwin a little bit faster. You could go the other way around to reduce its attack and gain some health. That might be your preference, but I think giving him that lethal edge and that aggressive edge is good, as long as there is some way to potentially answer it a little more consistently and a little more easily across a variety of different decks. So to me, these 2 changes would address the biggest problems with Tempo Rogue right now and help rein the deck in just a little without completely killing it. Now, I'm not saying that it would need both of these nerfs necessarily. Maybe just one or the other would do the trick. That might bring the deck back to a reasonable power level. Honestly, Edwin is a little bit more frustrating of a card to play against, so I might target Edwin before I target the Waggle Pick. But frankly, you might be able to make both these changes and still keep the deck healthy so that it's not quite so crazily influential over the meta. And that said, that's the Rogue problem to me. And I'm curious what you guys think. First off, do you think Rogue's a problem? Or do you think Warrior is still really maybe the real problem? How would you fix Rogue if you do think it's a problem? How would you nerf it? Do you think I targeted the right cards? Or do you think maybe really Evil Miscreant is the issue and you need to do something to Evil Miscreant? I will say on that note, one thing about Evil Miscreant is we've already been told that we're going to get additional lackeys in future expansions. Additional lackeys will be added to the pool, so Evil Miscreant might actually get weaker over time. If there are some weaker lackeys added, if Blizzard thinks that's an issue, they can just add worse lackeys, and then it'll be less consistent, less reliable, and you might get a weaker option more often. So it might kind of self-balance itself over time, which would solve its problem in the first place. Keep that in mind, but if you think it still needs some work now, feel free to share that in the comments below. I want to hear your thoughts on the meta right now, your interpretation on this Rogue problem. So I can't wait to see what you guys have to say. But until then, thank you so much for watching. And until next time, game on.